Go free.
This is, yeah. Swing like a man, right?
Whee! Hey there everyone, welcome back to another episode of EXCL Garage. The last proper episode you would have seen concluded the build of the LS3, taking a core L92 engine, removing VVT from it, rebuilding the engine, new bearings, piston rings and so on, and turning it into an LS3 with a big cam. Very exciting. So we're jumping off of that, back onto the GT86 this time for something very exciting. We're going to start tearing it all apart. We're going to take all the front end apart, bodywork, radiator, headlights out, whole load of wiring, and all that to start lifting out the engine. Getting rid of the 4-banger FA20 that's in here, along with the gearbox, so I can eventually put in the LS3 and a T56. There's absolutely loads to do. I might do some voiceover, I might talk along as I go, but really, I mean, you've seen me take apart this car before, and if you haven't, go back and watch the Rocket Bunny series. So I think we're just going to dive right into it, start tearing it all apart, start getting it put away on shelves, because it's going to be apart for a long, long time. And then we'll grab the engine crane and lift out the old Boxer engine. Let's dive into it. Here we go again, guys. So of course, first things first, we've got to get the car up in the air. You guys have perhaps seen it plenty of times, and it's been up in the air for months on end when I was installing the Rocket Bunny kit. If you're long-time watchers of the channel, then this isn't anything new to you guys. We're going to start taking apart the car. First off, we have to take off the body kit. We want to keep everything safe, stop it from getting scratched or damaged when we're working around the car, banging an engine in and out, and so on. So we need to get the arches off, put them up on the shelf somewhere, keep them nice and safe. Followed by the front bumper, which has all of its little spotlights plugged in and connected. Got to make sure we keep these headlights safe, don't want to scratch the lenses on them, want to keep them nice and pristine. And then we're taking off the crash structure. If you guys have followed this car at all, then you know that its story started with me buying it as an ex-write-off or salvage car, you might want to call it. So all of this is old ground to me. I've had the car in 1,000 pieces numerous times before, and all this crash structure and all this metalwork is brand new as of a few years ago. From here we start moving inwards. Plenty of electrical connectors to unplug. Make sure we don't damage those, don't want to damage any of the wiring in case we need to reuse it. Things like headlight wiring and so on, any body, loom, wiring harness bits, as you would call it. Of course, we're keeping all that. Need to remove the air filter, probably try and get this up for sale, get some money back, start putting that towards more engine swap parts. Need to get all the under trays off. Not only are they just going to get in the way later down the line, I do want to try and retain as much of the under trays as I can. I'll refit them after the engine's in and work out what we can and can't use. From here we need to drain all the fluids, want to make sure the radiator's empty before we start pulling that out. Of course, otherwise it'd just make a mess absolutely everywhere. The water that was in it came out a nice, lovely brown colour. With these out of the way and axes cleared up, start draining yet more fluids. Of course, engine oil, obviously, and gearbox oil, which had only replaced last year, pretty much was brand new, but off it goes into the bin. And that just means that when we come to one of the next steps, removing the drive shaft, or the prop shaft, we don't get covered in a big shower of stinky gearbox oil. So as I just mentioned, off comes the exhaust, which has seen a few bumps and scrapes in its day. Unfortunately, you won't see us drag that out because the camera here ran out of battery before we got to that point. This took us probably 2 or 3 hours in total. Wasn't too bad, but it was just a bit time consuming because you had the odd rusty bolt and just working on your back up for half of it did make things a little tricky. With the exhaust out of the way, we were finally able to pull off the prop shaft, which of course we won't be reusing because we're going to be using a new gearbox, which means we've already got a new drive shaft, which should bolt right up to the OEM diff and into the new T56 Magnum gearbox. And that's everything that we did in that one day. As you can see, I was working alongside my dad. We called it a day after all of this, and we returned to the next day. On to that. And here we are the next day, back at it again with one of my close friends here. And this is where we're really starting to get into the nitty gritty of it, having to pull off various lines, in this case heater lines, and vacuum lines, and fuel lines, all of which are made of rubber. Thankfully not too perished, of course the car isn't that old, but perhaps down to the temperature, of course it's fairly cold this time of year, or just the fact these lines have never been removed. They were quite a pain to get loose. Thankfully, with a little bit of heat, which I probably don't recommend for fuel lines, but we did it anyway. Didn't die, so that's the main thing. It just helped to really break the seal of the rubber, and you could really get your hand around it, twist it away, and off it came. Once we went around the engine, pulling off the various horrible rubber lines, we could really start getting ready to lift it out of the engine bay. So for that, the rest of the intake had to come off, as did the accessory belt. There are a few more electrical connectors, a few engine grounds, chassis grounds, and so on, but thankfully a lot of it actually stays on the engine itself. The primary wiring harness for the engine stays on the engine as a single unit and just kind of wraps around it, with the exception of a couple of big connectors that kind of break that away from the rest of the wiring harness that goes into the body of the car. As well as this, we had to disconnect the starter cable, the alternator cable, and a couple of other big chunky ones. We also had to go inside the car and disassemble pretty much half the interior. To get to the gear stick linkage, that in theory we had to wrestle free and pull out. We kind of forgot that last step though, and the gear stick ended up waggling around, tearing out a load of heat insulation in the kind of transmission tunnel, until we finally remembered and removed it. Then we were ready to pull the engine out. We hooked up the crane to the air conditioning compressor mount on the engine block and an engine lift hook on the back of the engine block. This gave a nice stable way to lift the engine out without the weight shifting around from left to right, back to front, and so on. We didn't bother removing the gearbox, we just wanted to pull it out all as one unit. Once the gearbox mounts were disconnected, the engine mounts were unbolted, it was literally just a case of lifting, wiggling, tilting, a little bit of swearing, and with a little hint of luck, the engine finally came free.
Swing like a man, man.
Way! Vengiana! Come on, run back here. Oh, right, there you go. LS, go in. Done.
Please,
After you.
please, put in.
And there we go, left with one somewhat messy but very empty engine bay, ready for more fun and games. Take it away, boys. Right, and there we have it, guys. That's all for today's episode. Just thought I'd sit here and chill in the very empty engine bay. What a big step that was, getting the engine out of the GT86. I think my next steps here are going to be start cleaning it up, getting some of this wiring and brake lines, fuel lines, things like that out of here. Perhaps get the engine bay painted. That'd be quite exciting, but I'm still not quite sure on that yet. perhaps drop a comment down below what colour you think the engine bay should be. But as always, I like to say, if you enjoyed this video, please perhaps give it a like or even subscribe to the channel for more. Because of course from here it's only going to get more and more exciting as we start getting the new engine in, need to get a gearbox and so on. But anyway, as you can tell, I'm getting in the Christmas spirit because it's coming up to that time of year. So it probably won't be another video until coming into 2022. So that's exciting. Hope you all have a good one up until then. Hope you have a good Christmas. Hope you have a good New Year's. And hope to see you next time. Cheers, guys. Have a good one. Bye for now. It's quite surprising how wide this engine bay is. You can get a lot in here.